Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. So I just started the live stream. Um,
Cool.
so hey everybody. Welcome to another Run Wild with us. Ask us anything. I'm Lisa Kastner, and I am the founder and executive editor of Running Wild and RIZE presses. And I am here with our phenomenal editors on Thursdays between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. And I am here with Rod, who is one of our latest and greatest editors. Hey, Rod, how are you doing,
Hi.
young man?
Oh, I'm doing very well, very well. I'll confess, a little nervous at first. I haven't done a lot of live stuff, uh, but I'm a sort of put myself out there type of guy.
There you go. Absolutely, absolutely. I was just telling Rod I wasn't sure if we're going to get Ben, and I'm not sure if we're going to get Peter. It depends. I know that they both have a lot going on. I think Ben has like he does like these short term classes, like intensive classes, and I think he's got one through right before Christmas. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So he might not be with us, but Peter, I'm not sure if Peter will. We'll see if Peter joins us. My goodness, you just attract all kinds of people. We've got Bad as Rad, who's is just like, hey, everybody. Um, Edie Lewis. Hi, Edie. The Secrets of Nim, all here saying hi. So, hi, guys. Awesome to
hi.
see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, Margaret's with us. Hey, Margaret. Awesome to see you. Anatoly says, hey, I'm here. Hey, awesome to see you as well. Hey Rod, hey Edie, hey Bad. Yeah, I know. We've got all the stars. All the stars are here today. How fabulous is that?
Mhm. Yeah, I've
So,
met some wonderful writer friends and booktube friends. They're
ab-
just incredible people.
absolutely. So, Rod, how was your week? What project are you working on?
Well, I'm editing two books and enjoying doing so. I'm working with some great authors. Anatoly is one of those authors, and he's got two extremely excellent qualities. One is that I think by nature he's a poet and an
Mm,
exceptional poet. And so he's really got a good knack for putting emotion into his prose.
hmm
And another thing that I love about him is he's an incredibly dedicated writer.
mm.
I'll send him a set of adjustments, and it won't take him a couple of days, maybe a week at the most. He thoroughly goes through it. He doesn't, race over it. He goes
Wow.
through it thoroughly, but he gets right back with me, and we're working together very well as a team. Very well.
Very, very cool. That's fantastic. And actually, that's a lovely segue. We actually got a question this over the past week about what is our editing style. So and Anatoly says, Rod, you are very kind. I've had a great time working with you. Stellar edits. Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
And Don says, hey guys, Rod, I'm a huge fan of Ben too. I know. I think everybody needs to be a huge fan of Ben on multiple levels.
Hmm.
Multiple levels. Um, but yeah, so what and I did prep Rod just for full transparency that we did get this question. So I would love it, Rod, if you would walk us through like what is your standard editing process?
Okay. Well, I'll let you judge the time, but I'll start with the developmental editing.
Mm,
That's usually, as far as I know, that's almost always the first editing that you do. And I like describing that as a bird's eye view of the story. We're looking more at fields than
mhm,
at blades of grass. And I have a pretty strong background in construction work. And one of the things that is more than a motto, it's kind of a way of life for any truly craftsman.
mhm,
And that is get it right the first time.
mm.
Like with the guys working on your roof, hopefully they get it right the first time, you
I'm
know?
praying, praying, man.
So So it's very natural for me to try to come up with the simplest method to get the maximum return on
Mm,
any task. And so when I became a writer and then later an editor, I came up with this, what I think is a fantastic method. I recommend it to all writers and all editors. I think it's worth using. And what I do is I've got a big flat screen television connected to my computer so
mhm.
my old eyes can see everything. So
Oh,
when I receive a manuscript from the writer, I'll begin reading through it. And
mhm,
as I read through the manuscript, I'll pause at the end of each scene. And on the big screen TV, I have my spreadsheet up, which is pretty basic. It's a pretty basic spreadsheet,
mhm,
and a lot of blank spaces.
mm,
So I'll pause, pick one of the cells in the spreadsheet, and I'll note what characters are in that scene and what's predominantly the point of the scene.
mm,
And then I'll continue reading through the manuscript. That little pause takes a few seconds, and I only put the bare minimum information that I need into the cell on the spreadsheet.
mhm,
So I continue through the whole manuscript, and I do that process. And as I go, I color code each cell. And the simplest way to do that is to color code by chapter. And that
mm,
way you got a good sense of how it goes.
mhm,
So when I get down to the end of the manuscript, I lean back in my chair and look at my screen, and I've got this wonderful visual representation of the story. And I'm able to look at that and I can say, oh, it'd really be nice to plop a new scene in right here.
mhm,
And wow, where did that scene come from? I think it fell out of another story. We got to get rid of that one. These two scenes are beautiful, but I think this one should be here and this one should be here.
mhm,
Then I lean back in my chair and I really look at the whole picture again. And I try to look for, does it flow really well?
mhm,
And is the rhythm of the beats there? And are they really going as they should?
mhm,
And when I get a good feeling that, boy, this is smooth, this is really looking good, then I move the adjustments that I made to the working manuscript.
mhm,
And there I highlight the sections that I'm referring to. And
mhm,
then I put a comment there for the author. Typically, one of my comments will be something like this: consider adding a few paragraphs, backstory, or perhaps a flashback. What we want to do here is give the reader a reason to care a little bit more about this character.
mhm,
And then I leave it up to the writer. The writer is writing his story. I'm just trying to help him out. And so I'll go down through the manuscript, highlighting the areas and putting in the comments. And then I send that off to the writer.
mhm.
The writer does his magic. They do what they do. And, from my experience thus far, the writers are creative people and they do some pretty cool stuff.
Mm,
So when it gets back to me, I'll look at all the writer's adjustments. And of course, we communicate. If there's anything that he, she, or I are not sure about, we can get on Twitter or Instagram or a Zoom meeting and talk about it.
mhm,
But when we get to that point that we're pretty comfortable with all the adjustments, then I move all the adjustments to the final cut draft of the manuscript.
mhm.
And when it gets there, the developmental edit is completely done. There's no reason to go back 10 times. You've got it.
Wow.
And it's just like, well, doing a roof. If you got it right, you don't tear it apart and do it again, you
Well, I
know?
hope. Mhm.
At least you hope they don't, right? So
Well,
that's, I'm sorry.
no, that's great. I was just going to say, so Peter, what we're talking about is what our editing process is. So Rob was just explaining his basic uh, editing process. Uh, so what about you, Peter? Do you have like a baseline that you typically follow when you're going through?
Well, I gotta say that Rod's approach is very dynamic and very interesting and all encompassing. I think it's really interesting the way you approach writing. So
Hmm.
mine is not that uh, encompassing. I mean, I go through the whole manuscript, um, and basically I ask questions of the author. What do you basically? What do you think about this? Or what kind of questions? I was just editing today. Um, I'm drawing a complete blank because I ask questions of the author, basically, and make comments here and there. I shift stuff around sometimes when it needs to move for a flow kind of thing, like you were saying.
Mhm.
It's got to sound right in my mind when I read it out loud, and when I read it quietly. It's got to sound right. So I move stuff around there. And basically, a lot of questions. The more questions I ask, the more in depth the writer can get into his or her story. I think, because it's coming at them from a completely different point of view that they used when they were writing the story. This is an outside voice looking in, saying, you know, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And that generally creates a much more strong narrative than if I just said, well, just put name comments down that, you know, I like this. This isn't so clear, you know.
Mhm.
And I do make those comments sometimes, but mostly just asking questions.
Mhm.
So
No, honestly, that's great. I mean, and I typically my first read, I'm reading as a reader, right? And to both Rod and Peter's points, I'm looking for pacing. I'm looking for does the structure make sense? Do I understand what the writer's goal is of the work? And I'll ask leading questions along the way, because again, this isn't my work, right? It's the author's work. So I want to make sure that whatever recommendations that I'm making or suggestions I'm making or questions I'm asking really kind of help elevate the story itself. So sometimes it's, you know, like I basically do a read through and maybe there's a couple of proof reading points, right? And other times I'll start going through it. And when I start looking at the structure itself, I'll realize, okay, you know, because some people are pantsers and some people are, you know, they'll go in with a full format, and there are large variations in between, right? Some people have really, really super detailed notes for their works, and other people have like 4 bullet points, right? And sometimes you can really tell when the author is a complete pantser, because the goal and the objectives and the pacing, all of the story changes as they drive forward within it, right? So sometimes when I'm actually working with an author, I'll get maybe halfway through it and I'll realize that there are repeated I have the same questions over and over again, right? Whether it's around pacing or like, so what is this story really about? Like, what's your objective? And I'll go back to the author with like a page of notes, just again asking them, like, what's the objective of this? You know, is this character intended to be a primary character? Because, you know, maybe we spent 5 pages explaining who they are, but then we don't go back to them, right? Do we want to go back to them, right? Are they in it? Were they intended to be key to this narrative? And if not, then there's no reason for us to have 5 pages explaining who this individual is, right? Things like that. So it's very different depending on the story itself. And, you know, I've had times where I give an author, you know, like a page of notes and they come back basically with a complete rewrite. That's just brilliant, you know. And I've had times when I work with authors and, you know, the revisions are pretty minor, you know. So it's very much dependent on the piece and what the author's intention was. So
I got a question for you, Elise and Rod. What do you do if the author doesn't pay attention to hardly anything you suggest or ask? Make any editing changes that you've put forth?
it depends. So if it's something where it actually harms the work, I'll ask the author for us to sit down and chat about like why. So why are they not taking the recommendation? Because maybe I don't understand, right? Um, I've only had that happen like twice. And when and actually both times that happened, when I sat down with the author and asked, okay, so why are you ignoring this? Right? Like, what is the purpose of this? typically they couldn't respond. They were just like, well, I just don't want to make the change. And I was like, well, you don't have to make the change, but this doesn't work. Like this section literally does not work. So we need to resolve this, right? You don't have to do what I'm telling you to do, but you need to resolve this, right? And once they got that insight, then it was like, oh, okay. And then they went ahead and made a change. Not necessarily the change I recommended, but they made a change that then, like, fleshed that out. So, how about you, Rod? What do you do when an author is like, nah, I don't want to?
Well, I've actually been very fortunate, or I'm just very new. I haven't had a lot of issues with that. T.S. Hoddle, Kimberly Sheed, and Anatoly Molotov, these people have been very dedicated writers. And they realize they need an editor to at least help them, to at least give them a second set of eyes. And when we have a question, I believe in wide open communication. An author can say, I totally disagree. My response will be, why? What do you see that I'm missing? And hopefully he can help me to see it. Now that I have a greater power, if an author was really difficult to work with, why, I would turn to the chief executive editor and say, "Hey, what do I do?" But that hasn't come up. And I found that, you got to wonder, in Peter's case, if you've got a writer that just will not work with you, does that writer want to be published? I mean, does that writer care about his own story? Here you got Peter, an expert editor, willing to help you make your story the best it can be. Why would you be against that as a writer? I'm a writer, and both of you are writers. I'm thrilled to have a good editor. I'm like, yay, I'm more than happy to hear him. Now, maybe even with Ben once I disagreed, but very rare because you guys know your stuff, and every writer needs an editor. And what good is an editor if you're not going to listen to them? So I don't have experience with what Peter's dealing with, but I feel for you, Peter, because it's a shame because you can help that writer, and he's not letting you.
Now, and what's interesting is, like, I mean, we all have friends who are, well-established authors. And when I talk to them about, like, so how do you work with your editor? And maybe it's just that I'd say they've been really lucky, but they minimally have a conversation with their editor about the recommendations, right? So it's not like they just blow it off. Yeah. So.
Interesting. He's the author from from outside the U.S. So the English or the foreign language translations had a bit of a hurdle to get things kind of more Americanized. And from his responses, or not lack of responses, I've gathered that, I mean, first of all, I believe he's set in his ways, and that's fine. The writer's work is the writer's work. If he doesn't want to listen to me, that's fine. I'm just making suggestions, asking questions. But I'm thinking that he's got a vision for his story in his own language that, could translate to the U.S., could translate to English speaking, might not. I'm still halfway through the novel, and it's still convoluted to me, but I'm willing to work with them, to keep working with them. But I'm not going as in depth as I did for the first 100 pages, because it went nowhere. It made no sense. It took me at least 40 hours to go through 100 pages and ask questions like, if it's that can be received or even paid attention, even heeded, then I got to take a step back. It's like, I'm still doing my job. I'm going to make sure everything looks great, is great. But if it's in his voice, in his language, in his narrative, then that's his book.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've had one novella editor, or not editor, novella writer, who, he basically just said, I accept all changes, but I had a whole lot of questions because there wasn't a lot of story, like the story didn't go anywhere, right? So I had to sit down with him, and talk through like, here are sections that I just didn't make sense to me. How can we make this flow better? And once he understood, like, oh, this isn't just a track changes, accept all changes, right? There were actual questions that needed to be answered. Then he got more engaged. But I had to have a sit down with him in order for that to happen. So
cool.
After Bad is Rad says, after an editor proofread it, when does it go from there to get published? Well, actually, our editors, what they're doing a combination of what I want to say concept edit, which is basically what Rod just described, right? As well as line edits. And then after that, it then goes to our production team. And the production team will then work with, we have a few different formatting companies that we work with to format the books into paperback, ebook. And they also then start working on submitting it for audiobook as well. So yeah. And then they partner with the author on the cover designs, just to get some basic concept ideas. So I hope that answered your question. Bad as Red says, fantastic teamwork. Honestly, we are really blessed. We really do have some amazing people behind the scenes who work incredibly well together. And thankfully, at least I think most of us, we're not very convoluted. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. At least I think it's pretty straightforward. I think the one thing that we get the most feedback on is people get frustrated because they're like, oh, I want my book out, next week or next month or, whatever the case may be. But, the reality is that when you're working with national and international or global distributors, they want everything at least anywhere from 9 to 12 months minimally before the publication date. And so in today's world, a lot of authors will find that frustrating because, small magazines and newspapers, and if you do self publish or you do POD, you can knock it out in a couple of months, right? Get it to market, but you're not going to get the backing of a solid sales force, and you're not going to have it potentially being backed by like a Barnes and Noble or a Costco or a Target, right? And that's really, what you really want, right? You want it in the hands of readers. So, and a lot of authors, they don't understand that, once you actually write the book, then there's a whole lot of work that still has to be done around marketing and publicity, and that takes time. So,
well, the whole adage that writing a book is 5% of the work. The rest after the work's been put into production.
Yep, exactly. Bad as Red says, that's exactly what I was thinking, Lisa. The patience level is incredible. It is. And I give people a lot of credit. Honestly, I think the smart play is, use the time that you're waiting for your book to come out, plan out your marketing and publicity. I mean, at least we provide tons of tools to our authors so that they can really be very active in their promotions. So, leverage that, right? And then once you've got that really solidly down, start working on your next thing, because according to the statistics, if you're a new author, you don't really start taking off until minimally the third book. So keep that in mind. That means you are constantly planning. You're constantly working on whatever that next thing is while you're backing whatever you've got you're getting out into the market now, if that makes sense. So Bad as Rad says, especially if you feel like I have written a great story and yet you want it out for everyone to read. I understand completely now. Yeah. And, if we could get everyone's stories out within a couple of months, we would totally do it. But again, I've actually had this conversation a couple of times with a few different authors who are like, well, I want my book out now. And I'm like, well, I mean, we can do that, but understand that you're not going to get the backing of a sales force. And isn't that the whole point? Like that's why you went with a publisher, right? So that you would have that B2B, the business to business sales force behind you, and acting as your advocate. So why shoot yourself in the foot because you're eager? It doesn't. To me, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, but that's me. Let me see if we. My God, everybody knows everybody. Everyone's on. It looks like everyone's on YouTube. That's awesome. Edie Lewis says, I've worked with a few editors, not experts, but great ones, and I've taken their advice even when I was a little uncertain, but I'm glad I did. I feel the same way, Edie. Like the editors that I work with, they ask me questions that at the time, I've had times where I wasn't sure I understood the question. And then when I went back and reread what section they were commenting on, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I totally didn't see that there. But you know what I mean? Like, that's why you need those additional eyes and that additional knowledge to help drive things forward. Tom says, you're in trouble when you can literally hear the sighing when he talks about a project. Well, yeah, that would be very true. Renegade says, advice is always a must. I always compare beta reader notes and take their suggestions to heart until I'm satisfied with the final product. That's great. That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Let's see.
That goes back to patience too. The patience to go through the different drafts of your story, and patience to wait for or to accept the comments from the editor, so that it may take 3, 4, 5, or 6 drafts to get to where you want it. You have to have the patience to get there.
Yeah, I agree. I had a person ask me on a show I was a guest on, what would be the number one advice I would give to any new writer? And my response was, have patience, because that was the hardest thing for me to learn. As time went by, I learned a lot, and I wrote my first draft of my novel in about 3 months. That, like Peter said, that that 5% was fun, and then there's a whole lot after that. It takes me a minimum of 100 to 120 hours of work to fully complete an edit on a novel, at least that. And then, as you guys said, there's so many steps after us editors get done. There's so much that has to be done. So patience is everything if you're going to be a writer. I would definitely say that, agree with that. That's definitely necessary.
And that goes with the publication of your novels too. As Lisa was saying, that most writers don't hit until their 3rd book. So you got to keep at it, keep grinding until you get to enough people, big enough audience to read your stuff.
Now, I'm trying to be smart on that one. My first book was a small collection of short stories. It's right behind me here. That was has been compared to like the Twilight Zone, and I think it's got like a 4.8 star rating on Goodreads and Amazon, so it's doing pretty well. So my second book that I hope to release right before Valentine's Day is another collection. Now, I got to talk with Lisa about this later. My third book, following Lisa's advice, I hope will be my novel. And that's my little strategy. I hope it's going to work.
I just think just keep grinding, right? Just keep on bringing those stories out. So Renegade says patience is a virtue, especially in the writing world. I mean, one thing, I mean, publishing or any form of storytelling, it is so competitive, right? There are so many people out there who are aspiring, and the only way you don't succeed is if you quit.
Yes.
Right? You can, if you fail, it's just another way of learning. That's all it is, right? The only way you truly fail is if you quit, or if you decide, you know what, I don't care. I'm going to ignore the whatever that feedback is, So, and it's very rare. I mean, especially if you're looking at talking about working with professional editors, it's very rare to work with a professional editor, at least in my experience, and not, a professional editor, you should be able to have that open conversation and ask those open questions, right? You should be able to bring forward those recommendations of like maybe changing the structure around or changing scenes, things like that. And if you can't have that open conversation, I think that's when you really have the problem, right? And sometimes you can't have the open conversation because, at least for me, one of the signs of an editor who's more junior is when the revisions that they're providing change the story so dramatically that it's really becomes their story, right? So they're not really making this a better story, a better narrative of the authors, right? They're making it their own piece.
Yeah.
And I personally, I don't think that's healthy.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah. But there, I mean, that does happen. I completely acknowledge that. So Renegade says, I don't have much experience in the publishing world. I've only had one short story published into an anthology so far. My first novel that I've shelved has been a work in progress for 8 years now. Good for you, man. Keep doing it. Caroline says, if you are in for the long haul, you will have patience. Those that don't, quit. It's that simple.
Yep.
Yep. The Secret to Nim says, never give up if you love your story. I've never been published, just self-published, but I'm happy for it now. Cool.
And I've read their work. They're excellent writers that are speaking there.
Excellent. Danielle says, interesting topic. Editors cost a lot of money, and the writer has to be willing to listen to suggestions. A good editor will always steer you in the right direction. Agreed. And it's funny. I recently was a keynote at Drexel University's MFA program, and this topic came up, like, should I hire an editor? And that is such a complex question, because it's really about, like, you've got to find, if you're going to hire an editor to work on your piece, you've got to find somebody who like gets your writing, and that their editing style and your author style really mesh. And I definitely recommend going out and asking to speak to authors that they've worked with in the past, and get a feel for that person's style. Make sure that they edit the types of stories that you write, because you may be shooting yourself in the foot by bringing someone on who maybe they're a great romance editor, but you're a thriller writer. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? So Renegade says, some of the best things I've read have been self-published. I agree. I agree. Now, again, remember, when I say self-published, that doesn't mean this person didn't hire an editor. Quite a few self-published authors hire editors. So, yeah. I don't know. Peter and Rod, what do you guys think about hiring editors?
I agree with what you said, particularly making sure the editor is a good fit. I'm pretty well known to be very confident. I'm a Scorpio, and I really live up to it. I've got a lot of confidence and enough experience to back it up. And I encountered an editor when I was beginning to look for editors, and not necessarily a bad person by any means, a very nice person. But the editor had a tendency to do exactly what you said, to
Mm,
basically rewrite my story. One time I edited up because I used to be an accountant. I'm a numbers freak. And, 89% of the words in that section of the manuscript, 89%, this editor wanted to change. And not only wanted to change, but rewrote it entirely, wrote,
oh my.
wrote their own story, you
Mm,
know? And I've spoken with a couple of editors who have used the word condescending.
mm,
And I've got to tell you, when you run into an editor like that, even for a guy like me that's pretty confident, it just takes the wind out of your sails. It deflates you so bad. I stopped writing for 3 or 4 months. I nearly gave it up entirely
mm,
because of that editor. And honestly, if I had not known Ben, who put in 2 cents, and a couple of other editors who also shared their thoughts, without that extra help, extra people that I know, had I gone on just that editor's work, I would have stopped being a writer. So
mm,
be very cautious. Definitely do what Lisa said. Make sure if you're a horror writer, make sure your editor understands, at least understands horror. They can work in 10 different things, but they got to really understand horror. And
mhm,
if you're a romance writer, same thing, because they're not really the same. Uh, I ran into something not too long ago where a gritty crime novel, and somebody got involved with the project that made it all flowery and, you
mm.
know, sort of like, oh, shoot, forgive me, the author of Frankenstein.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, that kind of very beautiful, flowery writing, but it doesn't belong in a gritty crime drama, you
Mm,
know? At least I don't think so. Well,
mhm,
anyway, that person had influenced that story, and it just wasn't a good fit. You've got this very flowery, romantic, la la la, in the wrong story. That editor was not a good fit.
mm.
So, Lisa, you're speaking pure gold with what you said. And to the audience, yeah, listen to her. She knows her stuff.
Well, Peter, what do you think? I mean, thank you.
Go
And
ahead,
Pete,
Peter. Say I'm completely wrong, and Lisa knows nothing.
no,
Well, I know better than that. I just think it's absolutely to your advantage as a writer to bring an editor on board to give you an outside opinion, even if you don't take it, even if what Rob was describing, even if they try to make it flowery language, you still have an outside perspective, and you have to be strong enough to say, no, this is not how I want it to be. This is my book. This is how I'm going to be. So maybe
mhm.
you have to go through 2 or 3 editors, hopefully not,
Yeah.
but you find the right editor who fits your work, who fits your style, who fits your genre.
Well,
So
and sorry, I completely agree with both Rod and Peter. Understand though, when we're saying, you know, you have to be strong enough that like this is how I want it to be, you need it, in my opinion, you've got to be able to justify it. This just can't be I've worked on this for 10 years and I don't want to make any more changes. That's completely illogical, right?
Yeah.
That's, that's like when your mom used to say, no, you can't go out just because, right? No, just because this is not going to make your story better. This is not going to make it stronger, right? You need to be able to explain why you want something to be the way it is. And the reason for that, right? That this isn't called your mom talking to you, right? This isn't like you're justifying your graduate thesis. It's so that your editor can help you make that happen, right? Because if they're asking you these questions, that means they're not seeing the answer when they're reading it.
Yeah.
So if you provide a response and that editor did not get that out of what they read, then their goal is going to be to try and help you make that happen. And a great editor and a great reader, that's what they're going to do. That's going to be their goal. Renegade says, exactly. There's a stigma that self-published means the author didn't have their work edited or anything beforehand, which decreases quality. I believe most have their works edited. I don't know that most have their works edited, but I can tell you that some of the most successful ones definitely did. GP says, I self-published my novels and worked with editors. I found some in my genre, and it was money well spent. Yeah, absolutely, GP. I mean, and some of the absolutely most successful self-published authors are very open about the fact that they hire editors to review their works before it goes to market. And that's the smart play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to add to all the writers that see this show, self-published with a small press or a big five, it doesn't matter. You've got to find, I recommend finding beta readers and find a good editor, a solid editor. And I would do this before I go to the publishing house, because let's say I want to put my novel up for consideration with Running Wild Press. Well, why would I give them a bunch of gibberish that hasn't been properly edited? I'm going to have a lot better chance of being accepted if it's very clean, it's been professionally edited, it looks great. And I can tell you, because I've read a lot of them, self-published authors kind of have a bad reputation. And it's for a good reason, because I've read self-published books that, I don't know, a 3-year-old grabbed a crown and just slopped it on the page and didn't care enough to even look at it a second time. And it's horrible, because it might have been a great story, but it was completely underdeveloped and horrible grammar, just every possible mistake. Now you take, I got to remember her screen name, because I don't know if she wants me to use her real name, Rebellion, something like that. Oh, well, you know who you are. um, a self-published author can get a good editor, and now you've got a nice clean manuscript. If your editor knows what they're doing and you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to communicate, because Lisa said that a couple times, you've got to have open, sincere communication. Hey, I don't know if this is working. Why don't you try this? Well, that sounds okay, but that's not quite what I want. Okay, try this. Between the two of you, your editor and yourself, you'll work it out. And in Peter's case, Peter, I feel for you. And not all of my editing is done through Running Wild Press. With a writer like that, I'd be tempted to say, boy, you need to find another editor. I would just send somebody packing, because I don't need the stress. That's just the truth of it. I work 15-hour days. I don't have enough time for stress.
I hear you. Yeah. Fortunately, this is probably my worst author yet. I've had one with a collection of anthologies. One author gave me grief and made changes. Pretty much, F. Scott Fitzgerald, like all the way up until the final version, he was making changes. Finally, I just said, what you put in there is your thing. Okay, I'm done. Because you keep changing. If I give you this, you're going to change it in a way that I don't understand it. But 2 authors out of what, 8, 10, 15, however many I've edited, that's nothing. I can handle it. Plus, I kind of like the story. Kind of want to see where it leads.
Yeah.
You're scaring me, Peter, because I've edited 5 novels, and well, I haven't come across one like you're describing. But it's inevitable. I'm bound to, right? It's going to happen, And then what I will do, is I'll come and find Peter and say, help. I was going to add too that these writers in the audience, you might consider, and it's not just because I'm here. I loved Running Wild Press long before they knew my name. You might consider, instead of self-publishing, because Lisa brought up some very valid points, that you've got a lot of power backing you with the production team and the distribution. And another very important point, you bring your novel to Running Wild Press, you might get the expertise of Lisa or Peter or the wizard of editing, Ben. And even if you get stuck with me, I promise I'll do my very best for you. But the thing I'm getting at is, you've got so much power in this press, and I'm sure there's other presses that are pretty good too. But think about it. You're sitting there all by yourself writing your story. Sometimes you've got some friends or a couple beta readers. But when you join Running Wild Press or one like it, now you've got a whole family. And in particularly this family, one thing that impressed me from day one is the what's the right word? The camaraderie, the like the acquisitions team. You don't have one editor smoking a cigar saying, "Yeah, this one, no, that one." These editors come together as a group and evaluate your work, and they all share their thoughts and communicate back and forth. I mean, you don't see that elsewhere. At least I haven't. And
Mm.
so, well, there's my commercial for Running Wild Press, but it's really a fact that having these great people on your side and the production staff and the promotions and so many things that Lisa could tell you about that I don't know anything about. You've got all of that when you come here, and being a self-published with my first book, I sat all by myself and wrote my book. I did have some beta readers and a couple of editors, and then I got on the Kindle thing and cranked out my little book.
Mm.
Completely alone in any marketing, anything at all. It just had whatever I could come up with. I had no guidance whatsoever. Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but you provide a whole list of things an author can do to help bring their book to market. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, we actually conducted a marketing workshop. Well, actually two. One where I walk you through how to develop your marketing and publicity plan, and we actually give you, like, when you're ready, when you're done with editing, we then give you access to a file that is full, or rather a folder that is full of everything from a tick list of the things that you need to do 90 days leading up to your books coming out to market, to a marketing plan template, to some of our most successful plans, a video. And we actually last night actually just had a workshop with one of Regina Yao, who's the president of the Pixel Project. And so far, our biggest seller has been Giving the Devil His Due, which is an anthology of short stories to benefit the Pixel Project. And Regina has a background in advertising, marketing, and publicity. So I asked her, I said, hey, why don't we do like a benefit for the Pixel Project? You can walk authors through how they can really properly prepare for their book coming out to market and give them ideas of things that they can do. And we recorded it. So if that's something that, if you're watching and you're an author and you want to learn more about what do you need to do in order to be successful, reach out to me. I will be more than happy to connect you with Regina. And, I think she asked like for $10 or $20 or something like that. Again, as a, just a small stipend to help benefit the overall program. But oh yeah, and not every small, mid-size, I mean, even large size press is going to give you the kinds of materials that we provide. And we do it because we want you to be successful, right? We want everybody to be successful. We want you to have as many people as possible checking out your story. And they can't check it out if they don't know that it exists, right? And it's funny, during Regina's talk, she said that. I swear she said that like a dozen times, right? People can't read your story if they don't know that it exists. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to make sure, I mean, that's what makes it that much more urgent for you to make sure that you get the word out about you and about your stories. So yeah, spot on. Renegade says, I've read some amazing fan fictions before compared to some traditionally published works. A lot of it depends on the story and what's popular at the time, I think. It's so much of it is, I mean, it's so much of it is about who's doing the acquisition, what are they taking into consideration when they are acquiring the stories, what are they looking for, and and then where are they willing to take it, right? So Peter, I mean, you and I both know we've had a couple of authors that we were on the fence about picking up because we weren't quite sure the story was developed enough. And then we got on the phone with the author and they were all in, right? I mean, like, game on, let's work together and make this thing fantastic. And then we've also had authors that, like, I still remember this, Peter, when we had this one author who he flat out on a Zoom call looked at us and said, I wrote this for 10 years. It's done. And I was like, okay. So let's just say as soon as he found out that he would have to work with an editor, he shot us down. And I was like, hey, it's all good, man. Like, if then you should go, then self-publish it and see how far you can take it, But we didn't. When no one on my acquisition team understands a work and everybody is coming out of the acquisition meeting with I need to talk to the author to understand what they're trying to do. That's a red flag for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Peter, what do you think? That doesn't happen very often, but
you made several points. What do I think about authors who come away questioning what the story is about? That definitely needs another rewrite. I mean, if you're unclear from the get-go, you got to go back and make sure it's as clear as well as possible. Again, hiring another editor might help with that aspect. Mm-hmm. But as far as the authors, I had one author who I started, even in the opening conversation, things fell apart. Because I was bringing up some suggestions before, work on this. About 10 minutes in the conversation, he's like, well, we're not going to change anything, but are we? I mean, this book is, like Luz was saying, this book is done the way it is. I'm like, it's not done. He's got so much more to go. And we ended up parting ways with that author as well, because he just was not willing to budge. So again, I mean, if you're not going to listen to help or advice, then just keep writing out by yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that's fine. You're not going to break our hearts if you say that you don't want to work with an editor. It's all good, man. Like,
right. And if you succeed, more power to you.
It's fantastic. Absolutely.
I think it's worth noting out to the audience, to the writers. I know there's few writers in the audience. Consider this, and I may be off track, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but consider this. I don't have a whole lot of dollars, but I bet every one of them. Stephen King, whether you like him or not, you have to concede that he's a master writer, super popular, and I think he's made a few bucks. Mm-hmm. If he started working on a new novel today, I believe he would work with an editor, and he would listen to his editor, and they would work together to make this next novel as great as anything he's written. I think even Stephen King, especially Stephen King, and any other writer that's that famous, they didn't get there by winging it by themselves. Behind each great writer, I think there's at least one great editor. And if Stephen King is not too proud to say, yeah, I need an editor. Why is this, this writer that nobody ever heard of saying, well, it's perfect. I don't need an editor. Please, Lisa, if I'm wrong, correct me. But
so every world famous author that I've ever met, they all had an editor that they partnered with, like someone they preferred to work with, to Rod's point. And it's just that we don't hear about them, right? For whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, yes, every established author has, and that I'm aware of, has an editor that they are like, this is my go-to guy or gal. And, we're the one that jointly we make this story, right? So Rod is absolutely spot on.
Now, I haven't mentioned it to Anatoly yet, but it is my intention. I think this is completely reasonable that, when Anatoly is up on stage accepting awards for his fantastic novel, I want to make sure he rolls up his sleeve and shows his tattoo that says, Rod is my editor.
There's no way that I am going to say that Anatoly needs to get a Rod is my editor tattoo. But he's gonna do it. All right. On his forehead. Above and beyond, man. Above and beyond.
I can only say that because Anatoly has a fantastic sense of humor, and it's always a ball to talk with him. He's a fantastic writer. He's a great person. You know,
Mm.
I don't know if he's still in the audience. I probably bored him to go away,
No,
but
he said
he
he's
is.
still
He's a
here, man.
brilliant writer.
Now, does this mean that you're going to get one that says, "I'm a huge fan of Ben"?
I should, shouldn't I?
You
Right on
should.
my chest, and that way,
Well,
when I'm strutting, oh, I forgot, I'm 30 years too old to strut. Oh well. Sorry, Ben,
you,
but he
you're
knows that
definitely
I
strut
could. But Ben knows I consider him to be a wizard. His red pen still scares me,
as
but
it should.
but yeah, Ben is something special, no doubt about it. And you guys know that better than I do. You've been working with him for quite some time, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Ben's awesome.
He is awesome.
I know he's heartbroken that he missed the episode that I would be here. Yeah.
Invited to the next ones too. So,
Aw.
uh,
Yeah, but all joking aside, from day one, man, Ben really impressed me. He worked with me, Running Wild Anthology 7. I've got that little short story in there,
mm-hmm.
and Ben worked with me on that. And honestly, it was the first encounter I had with a truly exceptional editor. And I learned more from that little short story than I could have studied in books for a year. I mean, Ben is just so impressive, and that's why I carry on like I do, because I respect the man so incredibly much. He's awesome, you know. So don't tell him I said that.
That's okay. This is recorded. He can watch it himself.
I just hope he doesn't turn you into a frog. You would be a cute frog, but I hope he doesn't do it.
I don't care. Do it.
Now, come on, Peter, jump in there with something crazy and zany about the frog.
Not
About
tonight,
the
man, not
frog.
tonight.
I'm sorry, I'm just being me.
No, all good.
That's great.
Yeah.
No problem with that at all. I just don't have the wicked sharpness that you have right now. So stage is yours, man.
I've got to say, it makes a big difference that I've got friends in the audience. Right before this came on, I got to admit, terribly nervous.
Oh,
But when
no.
you know you've got supportive friends in the writing world and the booktube world that care enough to take some time out of their lives and come to the show, you know, just to be there for me and say, "Hi, Rod," that's all it takes. And I'm like, cool. You know, have you ever experienced that, Peter, Lisa, that just having a friend in the audience made a difference for you?
Sure. Yeah.
Have you?
Hmm?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It makes it.
Especially you, Lisa. You make all kinds of appearances. Are you past that point where you like to have a friend in the audience?
Oh, I love having friends in the audience. Actually, I literally went on a haunted tour, a haunted downtown a tour of downtown Los Angeles on Halloween Eve, and I got adopted by two tourists. And to me, it's 1,000 times more fun when you're doing something with. It could be an old friend or a new friend, right? So yeah, absolutely, it makes a huge difference. Mhm.
Yeah, it gives you someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or like to say fun and zany things. It's more fun to have. It's more fun to have a good time with more
Before
people.
we run out of time, I do want to make a point of saying it is such an honor to be here on the show. I've admired you guys. Gosh, for the first time you popped on the screen, I've been like, wow, they know their stuff. And for me to have the honor of even sitting next to you, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and as welcome to our family. Because
Definitely.
I mean, we really do view everyone, our authors, our editors, our production managers, everyone as just one extended family. So thank you. And with that, I think we are almost out of time. So Rod, Peter, thank you guys so much for joining us. And my gosh, all you amazing, fantastic authors, editors, and just, fans of Rod. Thanks for joining us, guys. It has been phenomenal. And with that, I think we're done. So we will see you guys this time next week. Ciao.